Alright, Smart eSolutions. I'm going to walk us through how to configure a multifunction device to talk to the Edge server for the Smart eSolutions functionality. First, we need to list the requirements to enable a device to direct connect to the Edge server. First, we need the device connected to a network that has access to the internet. We need the TCP/IP settings configured. We need the DNS server settings configured. And in some locations, we may need a web proxy server configured as well. So, starting with the basics, the very first step, we want to make sure that the device is connected to a network. If it's connected to a network, then we want to print out a configuration report and take a look at the TCP/IP settings. It may already have everything configured that we need, but we do want to validate it specifically if we've been called out to enable the device for edge connectivity. Make a special note of the IP address because we'll use that in a moment to access the machine's web page. Next, we want to make sure that the customer has a network that accesses the internet. The easiest way to do that is to open their web browser and try to access a web page. If we can do that, then we can successfully connect to the internet, and that would tell us that the settings they have in their PC should be accurate, and those are the settings that we want to use to configure our Xerox device. Alright, well, with the remaining steps, I want to actually walk us through pulling up the web page, checking the proxy server settings, and then access the machine's web page and compare the TCP/IP settings there with the TCP/IP settings on the PC itself. Alright, and to access the internet, we'll open the web browser, and for a quick test, we'll go to a web page just to make sure that we do get out on the internet. Alright, so everything is good there. So while we're here, let's go ahead and check for the proxy server settings, and we'll do that by selecting Tools from the menu here. We'll come down and we'll choose Internet Options here at the very bottom, and then on the Internet Options dialog window, we want to go to the Connections tab, and on the Connections tab, we'll come down here to LAN Settings, and under LAN Settings, we can determine whether or not they're using a proxy server. Basically, we're going to look at whether or not there's a checkbox here for Use Automatic Configuration Script, or if there's a checkbox here for Use a Proxy Server for your LAN. If Use the Configuration Script is selected, we'll need to get in contact with the customer's IT department to determine the correct proxy server settings. If the use a proxy server for your LAN is checked, we want to copy the address settings here and the port as well, and we'll use those to configure the multifunction device for the proxy server with that information. If none of these boxes are checked, then we're certain they're not using a web proxy. If automatically detect settings is selected, that's pretty common and would mean that we would not need to configure a proxy server as well. So if the customer is using it, this is where we'd find out if they were using a proxy server, and if they were, what those settings might be. So with that, we are now ready to access the multifunction devices web page. So we'll take the IP address that we've got from the configuration report for the device and type it into the address bar of our web browser, and you can see that we have access to our multifunction devices internal web page. Most of our settings here are all of the settings that we need. In fact, for this will be under the property setting. We may be prompted to log in. If we're prompted to log in, it's username admin, and the default for the password is 4 ones. If the customer has changed that, however, we would need to get that information from the customer, what they may have changed that password to be able to access some of the functions here. And as you can see, Smart eSolutions, we do have a communications failure here, so we know Smart eSolutions is not working. If we got here and we saw a nice green check and everything was green here, then we would know that Smart eSolutions is functioning and that there wouldn't be anything else we need to do on this device as it's already configured for Smart eSolutions and communicating with the Edge server. But let's go now to the network settings, or the TCP/IP settings for this device, and that will be under the menu over here on the left hand side under connectivity, and then we'll select protocols to expand that submenu, and we want to go to IP Internet Protocol. On some devices this may be listed as TCP/IP, but here it's IP, and we'll select that, and it'll pull up our TCP/IP information. And as we see here, we've got our IP address, our subnet mask, and our gateway address. These two we want to validate are accurate, as well as our DNS settings. But we'll compare that against the PC settings. And to do that, to pull up the PC settings, we'll go to Start, All Programs, and Accessories. And under Accessories, we will select Command Prompt. At the Command Prompt, we want to enter the command ipconfig with the flag of all. But we specifically type ipconfig, a space, a / and then ALL. What this is going to do is just return all of the TCP/IP settings for the various adapters that are attached to this device or this PC. So when I hit enter, we can see that it scrolls through all the settings. But if I'll scroll all the way back to the top here, where I've entered my command, I can start up here and scroll back down to find all the settings I need. What I really want to look at is for the DNS suffix, the primary here, but we have additional here. If we have information populated here, we want to jot that down. There are some cases where this will be blank, and if it's blank, I'll cover that shortly. But when we have information here, we want to jot it down. For this particular example, I want to focus on the Knowledge.net DNS suffix. So I'll jot that down. Now I'm going to scroll down and look for my TCP/IP settings, and we found it here on my wireless LAN adapter wireless network connection. And what I'm looking at here are the again the subnet mask and the default gateway. Alright, so my subnet mask 255.255.255.0, and that matches what I have on the device. Alright, and default gateway is 10.10.10.1, and that matches on the device, so I'm good. If they don't match, we will edit the machine to match what the PC has. So the PC is a known good because we were able to access the internet, and if there's a difference, we would look to edit the device settings here. And next, let's compare the DNS settings. We want to make sure that we have the DNS settings as well. This is probably the number one reason that prevents us from connecting to the Edge server. These settings either being incorrect or missing altogether. And as you can see here, we do not have a domain name and we do not have DNS server information. So let's go back here to our command prompt window that we left open, and we see that we have a DNS server of 69.1.30.11 and 69.1.30.10. And if you remember, up here at the top, DNS suffix of Knowledge.net. And I'll take those settings to populate the DNS settings. On the domain name, we're going to use Knology.net. If the customer's network has something specific there, typically we want to use that. If it's blank, it's not going to be critical that this box be populated with information. The only gotcha is that in some scenarios we can't save any of the settings while leaving that box blank. So in that case, we would type in something like home group or something like that. So you can always default to home group. Just type home group if they didn't have anything listed there. Else, type what was listed there. And then as we scroll down here, we want to make sure that it has the IP addresses for the DNS servers. And that again was 69.1.30.11 and 69.1.30.10. And then all the way at the bottom, we will select Apply. And it may take a moment for these settings to apply. As well, I'll note sometimes when these settings are applied, they will show successfully modified, but the device will function as though those settings are missing. When in doubt, reboot the machine. And when I say reboot the machine, I mean physically power down and power back up the device. In some instances, these settings will be written to a configuration file, but the active information that the device is currently using prior to the reboot is still not populated. So a reboot would rectify that situation. It would pull these settings as it started back up, and everything should be good to go. So with that said, I want to pause for a moment and reboot the device. Alright, so I've rebooted my machine and it's come up and fully ready. So now we want to go up to the general setup. Wait, before we do that, we actually want to go to the proxy server settings. We do typically want to reboot after changing anything under the TCP/IP settings. So after we reboot there and come back, we want to check the proxy server settings. In this case, we do not want it enabled, but had we found that they were using a proxy server, we would check the enable box and we'd plug in the server, whether it be a name, a host name like proxy server dot companyname.com or something like that, or it be an IP address. It may just have been an IP address that we'd populate, but don't forget the port. That's going to be important. 8000 is very common, but there are other ports that are used as well. So whatever the port was set for on the web browser, we'd want that port set here as well. But as I said, in this case, we don't need the proxy server, but that's how you would configure it and where you configure it if it were required. So now let's go to the General tab. We'll go General, Setup, and then Smart eSolutions Setup. And we'll select this. And when it comes up, we can, if it's not enrolled, we'll certainly want to set it to enrolled. And then the next thing we want to do is do a test on the communications. This can take a couple of seconds up to a couple of minutes. So you'll just have to be patient and wait for the result to come back. But essentially what it does is connect to the Edge server, validate that the connection is good, everything is fine there, and then reports back to us. And as you can see here, we got the nice green check, communication with Xerox successful. Perfect, that's exactly what we want to see. So this machine is now configured and communicating with the Edge server and utilizing the Smart eSolutions functionality. And that's all we need to complete here. I did want to cover one thing in that while most interfaces, web interfaces, web pages for the devices will look very similar, if not exactly, to what I've just showed you, different devices with even model numbers, even varying in the same model number with different software versions, can look slightly different. And I did want to pull up one more real quick and walk through with you. Um, we're going to come in here and just like we did before, we're going to go to the Properties tab, and then under the Properties tab, we're going to go to I'll point out here, Smart eSolutions is actually already configured. Everything looks good here. So when we see those green checks, that's good. Our machine's doing exactly what we want it to do. But again, over here, connectivity, protocols, internet protocol, or IP or TCP/IP on some devices. Um, we will then validate that our subnet mask gateway and domain and DNS server settings are correct. And we do that by the command prompt. Pulling up ipconfig all and finding our settings for their network connection. And we see that 255, 255, 255.0 and 10, 10, 10, 1 are configured the same on both the PC and the multifunction device for the subnet mask and the gateway, and that our DNS server information is populated correctly as well. And of course, DNS suffix or domain name there is also what we're using here. Again, if this is blank and the machine will not let you save the DNS server settings without it, then type in home group would be a good substitute or generic to plug in there. And just real quickly, we'll hit on proxy server here. Again, it should be the same as we saw before, where you enable select IP address or host name, plug that information in here along with the port. Again, I can't stress the port enough. So that's all there really takes to get the device configured for the Edge communications and the Smart eSolutions functionality. If you have questions or run into problems, contact your subject matter expert for your work group, or your local office analyst should be able to help you. Thank you.